of entrepreneurship is new to many. So, on today's episode of the MedBoys podcast, we'd like to introduce Tony to you all, a successful entrepreneur who has been a part of multiple companies that have achieved numerous accomplishments. We're very excited to learn about what he has done. So, Tony, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me on here, guys.
Yeah, so Tony, I think our audience would really like to know about some of the companies and projects that you've been a part of. So could you just tell us a little bit more about them in a little bit more detail?
Yeah, for sure. It kind of goes way back. So I guess I'll start with how I kind of got started with startups and kind of what led me there and kind of where I'm at today in that whole journey. Um, it was interesting because I first started, actually, I never thought I'd be in a startup, to be honest. I always saw myself working at Google, working at Facebook with the big three or big four, and pretty much just a for lifer there. That's kind of how I saw it. I thought that'd be the end all be all. You work at Google and, there you go, right? But it was interesting. I kind of dived into startups back in my first or second year of university when one of my co-founders right now, actually, um, at the time he was talking about a startup, right? It's called Flipped. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of it. FLIPD. So it's pretty much a startup that helps people kind of get off their phone and being zombies. Everyone's kind of looking down on their phones across the street. Don't even know if a car is going to hit you. Kind of scary, to be honest. And yeah, it's kind of a startup that helps you have a better relationship with your phone. And I thought that was really interesting. But at the time, you go through university and you're taught, oh, well, let's just go through university, just follow this mindlessly and then get a job. So I didn't really care for it too much, if I'm being honest, at the time. And yeah, he came to me with the idea first year. He already had two other co-founders, but obviously being in tech startup, it's really, you need a lot of manpower when it comes to tech. Like just being a single developer just isn't enough nowadays or ever, to be honest. And so he came to me, he's like, hey, do you want to jump on this project and help me with this startup? Like maybe be like a late co-founder or whatnot, right? And I kind of just dismissed it. I'm like, nah, I'm not really interested in that. You know, and so on and so forth. And he comes back to me. Well, doesn't come back to me. We've been friends the whole while since high school. So he brings it up again in second year, I believe, or even third year. My memory's leaving me, but he comes back to me and says, hey, like I'm actually getting pretty good traction. Like I've been featured on like Bloomberg, New York Times, like on the news. Like it's definitely ticking off a bit. It's not like crazy, but it's definitely getting some traction. And I looked at his numbers, looked at what he was doing, and I was really impressed. I was like, holy cow, like you're on the news, like you're partnering up with universities like UCLA, all those universities. I was like, wow, this is crazy. And he, and at the time, when you're first year and you're just hearing about like this guy doing a startup, it definitely intrigues you and definitely brings you in. So we just kept talking, and he's obviously my friend, so he definitely talks to me about it here and there. And eventually he sold me. Eventually he got me on it, and I'm like, yeah, like let's do it. Like, what do you need my help with? And he pretty much coded the entire like Android server part of it, and he's like, I need help with iOS. And so I had a little bit of experience doing iOS, but like, as you guys know, like the whole like getting your hands a little wet with university versus actually doing something in real world is like night and day. It's like you're taught to like apply these formulas in school, if you will, but like actually being on your own and on your own 2 feet, trying to do something in real world with like no guidance, if you will, it's kind of different. It's really different. And so it was fun because he at the time, like nothing to take away from him, like he's really smart, really sharp dude and really smart, but like if you think about it, it's kind of tough because your feet are in the sand by yourself and you don't really have someone holding your hand. Like you don't have like some CTO that's been working in the field for 20 years to be like, oh guys, okay, like this is what we have to do, this and that. You're kind of like left there to fend for yourself like a baby, right? And you're kind of trying to figure it out while you go, and you're making all these mistakes as you go. And it's tough. So, but definitely that's where the challenge is, and definitely that's where you grow. So I found that really interesting. That's kind of what made me stay with Flip for the next, I think I worked there for 2.5 years. And really some exciting stuff happened. We went to Techstars, like top 3 accelerators in the world. I think it's sitting at over 3 million downloads now, top productivity on charts. So I definitely learned a lot there, coded the entire architecture of iOS, the whole mobile app from top down. That was really interesting. And then, yeah, that's kind of how my journey started there. Not too sure if I'm rambling on, guys, but
Mm.
um,
No, I think okay, first of all, I've used the app and I've used the iOS version, so thanks to Tony. But Tony, like I know it takes a lot of time to be a part of a startup like that because first of all, you have to financially think about where the startup is going, which way it's headed, in comparison to just you staying in school and like you said, ending up at the big four, right? But like what tips do you have for the people who are in currently in undergrad that are thinking of doing a startup but are kind of like contemplating because of their degree and finances and everything?
yeah, I mean, that's a really loaded question and a tough question to answer. And I think I definitely don't want to be the guy that sits here and goes like, it all depends. So I'm gonna try my best to answer that. It definitely takes a lot of willpower. And what I mean by that is like, it's tough. It's like, you don't make money for like the first, like, let's say you do a startup, right? The first 3 years, you're not making any money. Like you're going to make like pennies, right? And it's like everything's against you, right? Like you have no money, you have mentors, but like it's hard to kind of apply what they're saying sometimes. Like they're great, they definitely help you along the way and all that good stuff, but at the end of the day, like at the very end of the day, it's just you and your team, right? And if you guys aren't making money, if you guys are having doubts, like there's all these things that are working against the wave. And so again, like it's not for I sound cliche, but it's not for the faintest of hearts. But definitely my tip would be, what I would say is definitely don't try to make the jump right away. Like let's say you're in university, right? You know, like, let's say you're second year, right? And you think about starting a startup. And let's say a lot of people in university also have like a side job or like some sort of job that funds like their expenses, right? Not even if they're doing a startup, just for their own like expenses like rent and food, right? Mm-hmm. So the thing is, startup demands so much time. And like the thing is, your competitive advantage for startups is being able to move very quickly, right? So if you're not capitalizing on that, then like it's hard. So I would say, if you're thinking about doing a startup, don't make the jump right away. Because what I did, and I don't recommend, is me and Andres, we kind of just stopped going to school. We just quit our jobs and we just started a startup like right away. And like, you know, it's really hard trying to figure out how to like balance your expenses, all of that. I would say my tip would be, you know, do whatever you're doing right now, stay in university, juggle your job or whatever, maybe reduce a few hours here and there, maybe take less courses. And then I would say slowly work on your startup, because I wouldn't really recommend the 100 to 0 route for those reasons. That would be what I would say. And I think a lot of times, this is what I've been seeing a lot in when I've been working with a lot of startups. What I've seen a lot is, although I do agree that you should be like moving really quickly, coding things really quickly, and just getting it out there really quickly, at the same time, I do think people need to spend more time thinking about like their core value. Like, okay, what is the one thing our platform is trying to solve? Like, what's just one thing, not the bells and whistles features. What's the one thing we're trying to do well, right? And then just build a very, very small feature set around that. And then just like ask people, take it around and try to like validate your idea before you even try to build it. And I think that by in itself, that just takes time, right? You can't get that done in like late at night in your bedroom. Like that's not getting done no matter what. So you might as well like let it marinate and like let ideas flow while you still have your other things like paying for to keep the lights on, right? So that would be the definitely the number one tip I would say. I could definitely sit here and ramble on about tips all day long, but I would say that's my number one tip.
From everything you're saying, it seems like having a good team is really important in making a startup and just any idea in general. And especially finding these people who are co-founders or even employees that share the same core values as you and want to take the company in the same direction as you makes sense. So, like, how did you go out and find these other people? I know Andres was your friend, and that's how you guys found each other. But you probably found more software engineers, and was there any situation where like someone wasn't doing their job properly, or like there was some sort of conflict and you had to solve that? So how did you do that?
Right. So how did I meet my co-founder? So as you guys know, Andres is my CTO. and I've known him since high school. And then our other co-founder is Melvin. He's a COO, and I mean, they're just all titles at the end of the day. But I've actually known Melvin since I was 4 years old, so that's really interesting. I've known him about practically my whole life. I would say it's interesting because that question comes up a lot. Like, how do you find a a good CTO? How do you find these developers, right? And the short answer is it is hard because you have the big four always poaching talent, right? And not to go on a tangent a bit, but I thought it was interesting because a lot of companies are trying to get the government involved where like they're kind of monopolizing all the talent, right? So it's like, how do you create innovation outside of like Google, like Amazon, all these guys, when like they're just stealing all the talent, right? Because at the end of the day, all these developers, their job is just to optimize like a back button, or their job's to optimize like ads. Meanwhile, like, why can't we just have that talent like solve like cancer or XYZ, right? Yeah. Not to go on a tangent, but I thought that was interesting. So yeah, it's really hard to find these co-founders. But one thing I would say is that, and again, I know time is of the essence for anything in life, right? But I would say you need to find someone it's okay to find someone who's not extremely talented in the beginning, because it's better to find someone who's extremely passionate. And again, that sounds a little cliche, but like a lot of times, like these, like let's say, like if you're trying to find like a CTO that's been in the field for 20 years, like good luck, you're not going to find that guy unless you have such a great idea and you yourself are so good that he wants to be a part of that company. Like there's going to be a mismatch, right? And so it's better to find someone who's like, I'm just throwing out numbers, but let's say someone who's in like third year, right? They don't have a ton of experience, but they're passionate and they really want to do startup. And you have to understand that it's going to take time for him to grow, right? So it's kind of like you're investing into your co-founders, right? And that's kind of what it really is, right? And so I think people have this notion, this idea, like, oh, we got to find like the top talent, like right away. And it's like, yeah, well, do you have the same things to offer as Google, like 200K plus stock options? Like, it's kind of hard, right? So it's better off to find someone you get along with and is super passionate and is willing to go the extra mile. And to answer your second question, was there any like difficulties or anything or falling outs? There actually not difficulties or falling out, but one of our co-founders, we originally had 4, actually left the company. And I think so the reason why he left is because he actually wanted to go back to school. He wanted to finish his degree, just because he felt that, like, I'm almost there, I'm practically done. I might as well go back. There's some pressure from like, you spent tens of thousands of dollars university, definitely not cheap. So you definitely want to finish your degree there. So he's kind of like backed out of the company to do that. Although we do have an open door policy for him to come back. But yeah, I hope that's answered those questions.
Yeah.
So Tony, I know that for many companies, such as the one that you created, Flipped, for them to get so much traction after you do that jump from, university to wherever you are now, when you are actually developing your company and you're actually finished your product or whatever you've done, how do you go and, sell that to the consumers? So how did you go from Flipped being just an app to an app that has 3 million downloads now?
Yeah, for sure. It's a great question. Well, one thing to note is that you're never ever done building the product, as we all know. So if you guys have actually followed like our Flip from a long time ago, or like backtracked and checked on Google, we've had like 8 versions of Flipped. And I don't mean like one feature is a little different. I mean like overhauls, like completely different. You wouldn't even know that's Flipped. And so it's interesting because like, how do you start selling to consumers, right? And so it's all about thinking about your core value at the end of the day. I mean, even before we launched, we thought about, okay, what's our core value? It's to help people get off their phones, right? And then once you think about that, everything sort of ripples after, right? You start thinking about, okay, well, this could be used in classrooms. This could be used in school. Like the profs hate it when you're on your phone. So you can think about these applications after you think about what your core value is. And so, we just had a hypothesis, right? We wouldn't know how the market would react. We wouldn't know if, people were going to use it at, to do X, Y, Z. We had no idea. We just thought about the core value and did these case studies where we figured out, okay, this is the real problem. Again, we don't know how the mass market is going to use it, but we'll just guess at it and see what happens, right? And so that's kind of what we did. So we just created this app. Originally, it was only on Android, like I said. So at the time, like what it did is it literally blocked your phone. Like you literally couldn't use your phone. It was just a big screen that said flip on it. There was a timer counting down until you could use it again, and you literally couldn't turn off your phone. You couldn't leave the screen. Like it was just like a hunk of junk for a good hour. And so, again, that was the idea, right? The core value was to get you off your phone. And so we just put on the Google Play Store, and lo and behold, people started using it for some really interesting applications. In the beginning, parents were actually using it on their kids' phones. They just installed it and like said, "Too bad, so sad." Like, I'm going to close the cookie jars. You can't use your phone anymore. And all these kids were getting upset. So that was really interesting. And we actually went down a rabbit hole in that sense, where we were actually thinking about, oh, okay, that's how they're using it. I guess let's monetize it based on that. So let's start charging the parents XYZ. Let's start trying to monetize it this way. But then, as the market grows and more downloads come to happen, we realize that, okay, this isn't really feasible, because now you run into issues like things like, is it ethical to lock your kid's phone? And like, it becomes like, this battle of like all these media things where like what's politically correct and what isn't. And then people accidentally locking their phones. So then like, how do I get out of it? Right. And then if our app bugs out, then let's like, oops, like, yeah, your phone's kind of dead for like forever. Right. Obviously there's backdoors to it that we did release later on to help people get out of that. But that, again, the market spoke, and eventually we saw that wasn't really the route to go down. And we started noticing that people are actually using it to study. So that was one thing that we started noticing. And the thing is, some people might be wondering, well, how do we know, right? How do we just walk around asking these people what they're using it for? So what we actually did is we actually placed in analytics throughout the app, as I feel like every tech company should do. So these analytics in your app just allow you to see what people are doing and why they're doing it. But again, that's a whole nother like huge monster topic on its own. But essentially, yeah, we found out that people are using it to study, and we just ran with that. We just started, creating features around that, right? Like study times an hour, this and that. And we started thinking about, okay, like we're getting pretty good traction here, pretty good, decent revenue here. How do we take it to the next level, right? Then again, like I said, we started thinking about profs, right? Whole students wanting to study with it. So we started relating it with, well, what about profs, right? In their lectures, how many times have you had a prof snap about some guy on his phone or not listening, right? Or like some distractions in class. And so we started thinking about, well, what if we, partnered with these professors where they can actually offer attendance awards through our app. And so when people, flip off, quote unquote, then they get awarded these attendance marks. And now it's, it's mutual beneficiary to both people, because now the prof gets everyone to listen, and he's kind of enjoying what he's doing and he's teaching, and, he's helping his students learn, while the students now get participation marks. And now they're just more zoned in, more focused. And so, yeah, I hope that that answers that.
Do you need an ethics person or something in your team? Do you need like someone specific like that who's always looking into privacy issues and ethical issues, or was it just like team-based research?
I think it's just team-based research. I mean, that would be ideal, but like having a sole person for every role and every job. But the thing is, like, when you only have like 4 people, like there's so many other stuff to worry about that you kind of just have to be like, yeah, we can't really worry about this. Like, it'll come up when it comes up.
But my question was like I take you as an inspiration, and so so do Nimit and Rushil, because you went to U of T, and looking at the app grow so much, we obviously draw inspirations. Many others do from the people in their university and stuff. But I think what people fail to realize out of entrepreneurship in general is like they only focus on the monetary aspect, and they obviously like try to rush into things. And like you said, you're not going to make as much money in the first 2 or 3 years. So I think like the first step, which is to come up with the idea, is also like one of the most important steps. And I feel like people rush into it. I've seen myself rush into it whenever we've tried coming up with company ideas and stuff. Do you have any tips for like when you're starting off projects, how much time should you spend and how much research should go into actually coming up with the idea?
I mean, yeah, that's a great question. And it's a tough question, but I'm gonna try my best. I personally think that the ideation phase is, practically speaking, theoretically speaking, could take forever, right? You could sit there and think about an idea for as long as you live, but practically speaking, you shouldn't spend too much time, in the sense where you should be just sitting in your basement with your friends and like drawing up like what we should do. I think it's better to take a more receptive approach, and what I mean by that is like, just like think about an idea that you guys are all passionate about and a problem that you're trying to solve. Scrap something together really quickly, and then just go around and ask people and see if they actually have a problem with it. Like, go up to people and be like, hey, do you have a problem with this? And they'll either say yes or no. If they say yes, then perfect. Then you'll be like, okay, what do you think about this solution? They'll either be like, yeah, but it doesn't really have this, which is a good thing because it means they care, right? If they go like, I don't care, then like that's bad, right? It's bad to have a product that nobody cares about. It's better to have people say, giving criticism on it than it is for people to be like, I don't care. Because if they don't care, then like that's the end of that, right? But if they're actually saying, criticizing things like, oh, but like, it's gonna be slow, or like I don't want to keep that in my pocket, or whatever it may be, right? That means they actually do care about that problem. And that's one thing to know. But yeah, I would say have a more like fast approach in that sense. Like just go around, figure out if people actually have that problem, because a lot of times, we think it's a problem, and when we're sitting there all thinking of the idea, we're like, oh yeah, people have this problem for sure, and then we realize, okay, no one has that problem, and then you just spent like a good like 2 months doing nothing. Actually, it was really interesting because I don't know if you guys have seen DoorDash's Y Combinator video that they submitted, but they actually didn't even spend any time thinking about an idea. They just literally went like, okay, we have no idea, let's go find a problem. They just walked around restaurants and asked them, hey, what problem do you guys have? And they just said, oh, we're not getting enough orders, blah, 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 blah. And they're like, oh, okay, let's just make a platform where people can order. Like they didn't even think about a problem to solve. They just walked around asking people, which is another great way of doing it. Like, let's say you're passionate about fitness, which I am, right? I would just walk around the gym and be like, hey, like, how could what tech thing can I create tomorrow to help you with your problem? And they would, they tell you like, oh, I'm always forgetting my sets and reps. I wish there was an app for that, blah, 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 blah. And before you know it, you start having like, let's say you ask 50 people, right, who really love going to the gym. And that's the thing, right? You want to ask people who really go, not these people who go once in a while, right? And then you'll notice that they all start saying the same thing. Like they'll all start like maybe 30% of it is like outliers and different things they say, but generally they'll say the 70% of the same pain points. And then you can kind of draw this, comparison where you go like, okay, like, we have a good overlap of these problems. These were the things that people want solved. Let's see if we can like figure something out to make it. And then, back to the drawing board. And then you come back the next day and be like, hey, like, what if we had this? Would you use it then? And then, it's just this constant iteration of like making that idea better. And till you get to the point where they'd be like, you know what? Yeah, I would pay for that. And then that's when you're on the right track. Obviously, you're not like, you haven't struck gold, but like you're on the right track of like, okay, like, I actually have a product that people actually demand. Yeah.
I think it's very interesting because back in, I think it's pre-COVID. It's definitely pre-COVID when we joined the hub. It was me, Nimit, and Rushil. We were actually coming up with more ideas to start on a company. And Nimit and Rushil, I don't know if you remember, we actually had an idea about masks. We wanted to start a company for masks, and it was interesting because this was before COVID. We had no idea that it was going to come. And the reason for us starting masks was because of the growing air pollution in India and China. So we actually wanted to make masks here and then somehow get them to countries like that where there's more air pollution. But it was very interesting because, COVID hit. And then after that, I feel like this idea would have been like more like financially beneficial. We just didn't pursue it. But I guess like you just have to research more, I guess.
Yeah, that would have been a home run there because definitely started that before COVID. I mean, yeah, that took off too. I mean, and that's a huge part too, right? Timing is a huge part too. Like a lot of people foresaw that COVID would be like a disaster, and they kind of pivoted right away to these masks. I don't know if you guys remember SOS Leather. I don't know if you guys know the hub company, but
I think I've heard of them.
Yeah, so she was like collecting leather, like old leather from like airplanes and stuff. I can't really remember off the top of my head, but she pivoted right away as soon as she saw that there, these masks were going to be in demand. Like, she printed them out, made them really colorful and cool, and like that kind of took off. So a huge part to consider about your like idea as a whole is definitely like the timing, right? Like let's say you made like Walkmans, right? Like for whatever you started building Walkmans in 2021, like nobody would buy it, obviously, right? So obviously timing is a huge part of it, right? And so like if you see something that is it's like a year or two away, like for the market to be ready to consume it, then like that's generally a really good thing too. Like like if you think about Uber, if it was out in like the 1970s, you'd be like, what? Like people be like blown away, like what is this? Like we're not ready to buy this, right? It's the same thing with like electric cars, right? Like it slowly takes time for the economy to be accepting of it, right? If they start introducing that and like, when nobody cared about the environment, people be like, yeah, well, what's so cool about this, right? And so that's another thing to consider too, is like the timing of everything. But yeah,
I think that brings us to the end of the podcast. Thank you so much, Tony, for coming in. We learned a lot from you today about the ins and outs of entrepreneurship and how we could use our time properly in undergrad and even after undergrad. So like I said, you're an inspiration to all of us, and I'm sure for the viewers who are going to watch this podcast as well. Thank you so much for coming in.
thank you so much for the kind words, guys. I can't believe 20 minutes is already over. I didn't even realize that.